And I think to a large extent the development of the academic division of labour since the Second World War, and in particular the shift in emphasis from teaching to research, has led to a fragmentation of intellectual effort that represents a major obstacle at this stage of Cambridge is going to create new intellectual syntheses. But it remains the case, I believe, that this is a time when we can make another break. We can look at what's going on, and we can say that most people basically are essentially supporting an unequal status quo and not doing much to change it for the better. But nevertheless, it is possible, given the traditions of this place, for some handful of networks, of small groups of people to decide to take it in their hands to do something new. And there is every chance to do this because Cambridge has become a kind of global factory for graduate students and postdocs, which brings people in from everywhere in the world, throws them together in groups such as this, and creates, I think, all the possibilities for renewing Cambridge's established tradition in a new way. Okay, so to sum up my basic theme, what Cambridge specializes in is self-organized networks which are capable of breaking with established tradition and making a new connection to the universal. And that this becomes a matter of great urgency at a time where humanity has slipped into making a world society that it doesn't know how to handle and suffers from problems which are too many even to begin to try and list. I think that the principal obstacle to this process of making a break, renewing connection with the universal is two things. One is the continuing place of Cambridge as a means of reproducing national privilege, especially at the undergraduate level. There's too much emphasis on Cambridge students at the undergraduate level being drawn from Britain and channeled somehow into a faltering national elite. And the second principle, that we live in a time in which centralized hierarchy has never been stronger in Cambridge. This is mainly because of the reliance of the university on national government funding. But it's also the case that much that has taken place in British society over the last few decades has involved a kind of bureaucratic centralization, and Cambridge is not immune to that. So it seems to me that if there is this institutional possibility of self-organized networks doing new things, it has to struggle now, I think, with forces of centralization and with the legacy of being a kind of agent of national privilege that's how I would identify the sociological problem. I think we do have, especially at the graduate level and the young researchers, a global population that often doesn't know itself particularly as that often is made to feel marginal in a college system that is still organized to, in the main part, to support the interests of British undergraduates, which is, after all, their historical role. But nevertheless, I believe that Cambridge's ability to draw on the best intellectual talent around the world and put them in one place within the institutional framework that I've alluded to does represent a still, I think, largely untapped political and intellectual resource for the place. To go back to the basic theme then is that we live in unequal society. Development is the attempt to break from it. Democracy, government by the people, for the people, and so on, has as its antithesis inequality. You can't have a democratic society in which some people have no power at all, no spending power, no political power. And we're talking about a world society in which the inequalities are massive. So the first point is that we live in a society, whatever our aspirations, that is tremendously unequal, and over the last 30 years became more unequal, not just internationally, but at every level within national societies. The piling up of wealth in a few hands produced an increase in inequality, so much so that it felt as if the nearest decade to what we were experiencing was none of them in the 20th century, but the Gilded Age of the 1890s, which was the last time when finance capital ran the show and produced this kind of inequality. So my first point is that we may like to think that the world society we live in is not a racial order, but it is still. And the symbol of that racial order is Africa, which, apart from being the poorest region on the planet, is also locked into the bottom role in a racial hierarchy. And so the first thing that we have to do, if we are serious about global development, is to tackle the remaining manifestations of this racial order. And we have a good chance to do so for two reasons. One is that the shift in economic power from the West to Asia, which has been building for some time, and even under present circumstances is continuing, breaks up a certain vision of the world that was built through and by the North Atlantic. In other words, America and Europe built up a particular vision of the world through their dominance of it. And I'm sure, but my value as a prophet is something I wouldn't bet on if I were you. But I believe that in this economic crisis, the permanent and major loser of all the world's regions is going to be Europe. And I think the crisis, as it affects Europe, is not yet even widely known. But it involves, amongst other things, the collapse of manufacturing employment and the exposure to dodgy loans in Eastern and Central Europe, which will destroy the European banks just as reliably as Wall Street was destroyed by subprime. So my second point is that there is this historical shift taking place, which is by no means certain in its outcome, but for the first time, capital has become globalized, and the epicenter of global economy is shifting back to where it once was, which is in Asia. And this means that historical society is more fluid than at many times for a long time. And secondly, that the economic crisis that I don't have to tell you about, clearly represents a major opportunity for us to devise new solutions to the problems that we encounter, which in my belief we have not yet fully grasped, which I think, there are some people I know who believe we're in for 10 years of it, but in any case, intellectuals can always flourish on the basis of other people's misery, and I do believe that we face now an opportunity for radical intellectual and political action that is the greatest and most open for a generation. And it's in that context that I would conclude by saying that I don't have any recipes for how you're going to make your impact on international development, based in Cambridge as you are, but I would simply ask you to look around you and say, who's the 80%, who's the 20%, and which one do I want to belong to?